And just on that, I know there are others who want to ask questions too, but if I may, listening to you, I mean, you used an expression a few minutes ago that, you know, the Walmarts and the Apples, they set the rules. And, you know, what about the framework now of Professor John Ruggie and his team, you know, the protect, respect, remedy, and the guiding principles that corporations have to respect all human rights, which would include rights to food, safe water, so it would cut across you know, if there are those in the supply chain who, to save costs, are endangering health and safety, for example, are you cross-referencing to that agenda?
Yeah, I think we are in some way just not directly. They try to involve us into some of these discussions. I should say we stretch it a bit thin. Sometimes I missed there's a Milwaukee kind of meeting, but I wouldn't be able to go, and I missed that. But I really, you know, I believe all these will be tremendously helpful. At the end of the day, we're talking about, you know, a different type of world economy. You know, before it's kind of local made and everyone knows about this. You know, I buy from there, I live nearby. If you do some bad things, I know that. But now, you know, it's all over. I never know in the market. I never know where does it come from, what kind of impact does all this have, and the life cycle of all these gadgets and apparels. It's all getting so short. It's not out of blue. You know. Somewhere, this whole metal processing is going on, this mining is going on, this kind of all this dyeing and finishing are going on. It's dirty, you know, it's still somewhere. And now how do we, you know, bring all this back? Connecting that, I think information is the way to eventually bring this back, and we need to tackle the total value chain. In that life cycle and value chain, I think the leading corporate citizens recognize this, but I mean, how soon they're going to move toward this depends on how much the stakeholders going to care about this. Because at the end of the day, they want to, every forum, they say, my heart is great. You know, it's all coming from here. But in reality, you know, all these investors kind of making a lot of pressure on them. It's short-termism, unless there are enough, you know, all this care coming from the stakeholders. It won't happen. So it's very important to bring up that public concern, and it's very important for public to express. It's very important.
Both of my watches say that we are running out of time, and I'm very curious to see Chris standing to ask a question. Should we take a couple more questions?
Sure.
Okay. Is there one from you?
I think we're over there.
Yes.
Is that right?
Let's take two more questions, and then we're going to move to reception outside. We'll have a chance to talk to all of our speakers some more and continue this discussion.
Great. Thank you. My name is Mario, and I have studied and worked in sustainable business media for the last couple of years. And after many discussions and a lot of learning, I've come to the conclusion that within the business community in the United States, there's been at least two major forces that have propelled the business community to think about sustainability. And one has been the internal dialogue within industry associations in the United States and voluntary guidelines that they have established. And in cases within the last 3 years, even established voluntary collaborative NGOs that work as independent bodies so that the organizations can rely on certain data. And so that's one thing. I'm curious about industry associations within China that are looking to also do something similar, parallel as done in the United States. And secondly is sustainability reporting has also flourished, although not to the extent as much as I'd like to have been, but I'd like to also learn about if there's a degree of sustainability reporting within China. So that's it.
Thanks. Can we take our last question together? Thanks.
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle Lau, and I work with the UN Global Compact. Thank you so much, Madryn, for taking the time to speak with us, and also Business and Human Rights Center for organizing this event. My question relates to the Green Choice Initiative you mentioned, this collaboration with 21 NGOs. Could you talk a little bit more about the initiative? Who are the consumers that you're targeting? And I think when you think about responsible consumption or sustainable consumption, a lot of Western consumers in Europe and North America may have strong brand identify strongly with brands, and there's a very strong consciousness of what brands represent. But does that also translate in China? Would you give that same presentation in China? And also in the West as well. I think many of the issues you mentioned, many of the stories that you presented would be quite far-flung for the average Western consumer. It's 2 or 3 links up the supply chain. So what are some of the engagement strategies that initiative takes with consumers that are based in the West? As you said, China is the world's factory. So how do you get that message out to consumers that are not always in China, based in China?
Thank you. Yeah, your first question about industrial association. Yes, when we work on the IT industry, and finally, just after our second Apple report came out, and we suddenly have the PCB industry association came to us saying that, look, we are a growing business worth 140 billion yuan, and now this type of report is kind of making a lot of implications on us. The government could put us on a kind of a highly polluting industry list instead of encouraging this so-called green IT, kind of a information technology, view us in a very different way. So let's have some dialogue and this and that. But I assure you, it's not quite there yet. All these industry associations, most of them put kind of a growth on the very, very hard target, and environment, social responsibility is still not quite there. Some of them try to drive this, but it's still not there. Just tap into the last question about how do we view all these big ones or smaller ones, local ones, multinational ones. I don't care. I just care about leverage. If I go to those, we can't. As an organization, we can't do something like protesting in front of a factory. As an NGO, we just, so far, that's not quite sustainable to do it in China, to put it that way. So we won't be able to do it, so we need to find ways to leverage our influence on them. So there are all this, supply chain is just one of the ways, and then we could have some other ways to go through as I said, the investment and the banking and all these are different ways. You talk about reporting. I think reporting is extremely important. So far, as I mentioned, in China, we still don't have the toxic release inventory type of legislation. We're working with partners like Greenpeace, like NRDC and others, and local NGOs to try to push the government to make that legislation. Legislation that all these major companies need to disclose their discharge data. They could start from the basics. Here TRI involves some 600 chemicals, I learned. But back home, none of them. Most of them are not even monitored. There's no legal requirements to monitor them. But we do have them monitor several dozen kind of them, and some, including some heavy metals. So they do report to the government, but now we could start by asking them to disclose that. And legislation is not moving very fast, so we go to those brands saying that, look, all of you could come together making a requirements throughout your supply chain. Those who supply me, you need to disclose that, including in the future, so you can gauge who are trying to do better year on year. Because talking about moving beyond compliance, you have to have data, right? You can't just allow this wild assumption, kind of a claim that we are better than that and this and that. You need to have all this data, solid ones, water efficiency, energy efficiency, you gotta have all of this. And your last question about the Green Choice Initiative, we now formed the Green Choice Alliance. It started with 21 NGOs, and now we have 39, as I described. And the way to engage the consumers, the original idea is that, look, we have all this, we're going to give them the industries. We're going to allow them, which beer factory is kind of breaking the law, which toilet paper mill is kind of breaking the law. And so that before they go to buy them in the market, they're going to check it out. That doesn't work, unfortunately. It's simply no one has this patience to do it this way. And so at this moment, I think the thinking is go to the brands. In China, China is kind of moving very fast along its consumer-based economy. It's just very much similar as here. What people want here, it's very similar. The consumers also want them back in China. They trust the brands, and because they don't have other ways to gauge the quality and everything. So I think there's a major opportunity in our parts of the world to generate kind of a local awareness and local pressure coming out of China. I described about the IT products. I'm amazed at how they respond to us. We made a short video on some of the this pollution problem of IT industry. I put it on our version of Twitter. Just 2 weeks, it had been viewed 160,000 times. Just and those are consumers. They tap in because they love iPhone, they love iPad, they love all this gadgets, and they want to learn about this type of things. It's and they express. Of course, some of them defend them, some of them debate, but through the debate, gradually people understand. There's one thing that I truly trust. None of the consumer, most of our consumer, we don't want to exchange our enjoyment of the trendy IT products with the pollution and poisoning of the environment and the communities. I truly trust that, but they need to be informed to make their choice.
Thank you. Thanks. We are about to wrap up. Right before we do, I just want to say something that's very important. You have heard a little bit tonight about the work of the Business and Human Rights Resource Center, the tremendous work that we do around the world in tracking the human rights performances of companies in so many sectors, in so many countries, in so many languages. And we allow the affected communities to give their voices and for companies to respond. And we foster the kind of debate and discussion that you heard this evening that is online 24 hours a day, 7 days a week around the world. That is free. It's absolutely free. The reason that we can remain so completely impartial in the information that we present is that we do not seek corporate funding. We don't accept corporate donations. So how do we support this amazing staff, these regional researchers? Coming up, we have a new regional researcher soon in the Middle East. We support this organization through the support of people like you, and I want to invite you to join us, to be part of the change you want to see in the world. On your way out, you'll have the opportunity to make a donation in the baskets that are standing in the back, or go online at the website, business-humanrights.org. Please join us. I'd like to invite you all to also join us in the reception outside. We'd like to continue the discussion. If we could have another round of applause for all of our speakers this evening. Thank you for coming.